Oh,
She flirted all
I
night,
read too
then
fast and I picked
pointed
the
me
wrong
to the
thing,
door.
and
So I used it. She laughed. While she was building an empire
it's
with
not
another
like
man,
overall. It's
using my money,
I'm
my
getting better,
business, my
but
trust. I was building
you know,
something she
it's
never saw coming. She wanted me gone.
and also
I made
like
sure she
a
regretted
lot
that
of it is
wish.
are like
My name is
nuanced
Connor
differences.
Fontaine.
So the
I'm
difference
47
between
years
like
old, and I used to think I had it figured out.
what was the
I
one I
run a
read last
mid-sized
night?
logistics and supply chain company out of Charlotte, North Carolina. 15 years of grinding, building
Let me
client
see
by
if I can
client,
find it.
deal by deal. We're not Wall
It
Street,
was
but we're
like
solid. The kind of business that doesn't make headlines, but keeps the world moving.
ChatGPT.
I married Jolene
No, not
11 years
ChatGPT. I have
ago.
it pulled up
She was
somewhere.
sharp, funny, ambitious in a way that felt
Oh,
electric back
deleted
then.
it from yesterday.
She built her own lifestyle brand, curated home goods, interior styling,
Ah.
a
I don't
social
log
media
into
presence that
ChatGPT
grew
'cause I feel
faster
like
than either of us
that's
expected. By last year, she had 800,000 followers and a sponsorship calendar that looked like a Fortune 500 quarterly report. I was proud of her. I want to make that clear before everything else. I genuinely was. But somewhere along the way, the woman I married started treating our marriage like a backdrop, something tasteful to photograph in front of, then step away from. I noticed it first in small things. She'd be on her phone at dinner, laughing at something on her screen, and when I asked what was funny, she'd just say,
I'll have to use
"Oh,
in
nothing,
English
just
for
work stuff." She stopped asking about my day, stopped reaching for my hand in the car. The warmth didn't disappear all at once.
So for
It
example, like
just
this,
drained out slowly like water from a tub you forgot to plug.
like even
Reed Voss entered the
let's see,
picture about
what is it?
14 months ago. He was a so-called brand strategist. Late
So for
30s,
example,
good jawline, the kind of guy who used
no,
words like synergy
but it's
and
similar
narrative
to
arc
sore
in
sore
casual
or
conversation.
hitori hitori ga
Jolene brought him on to help
datsu
expand her
datsu ni.
platform. I shook his hand at
Then
a
you
dinner
have this
party,
too. So
thought
it's like
nothing
ah
of it.
sore
He had that
hitori hitori
smooth, rehearsed
kakuji
energy that some men
koko.
wear like a suit. I should have trusted my gut that
I
night.
don't know this
The
one.
evening it all broke open was a charity gala at the Harrington
But then
Club,
you
one of
have it
Charlotte's
where it's
old
like,
money
oh, this is
venues,
kind of an
all
old
dark with
feeling, more
paneling and crystal
formal.
chandeliers.
This
Jolene had pushed hard for
is
us to attend.
individual.
Big room, big names,
But this
good
is an
exposure
individual
for her
case,
brand.
but this is
I wore my
more.
navy suit. She wore a deep burgundy dress that turned heads the moment we walked in.
So this
For
is like
about
a
20
very
minutes, we were a
thing.
couple. She looped her arm through
This is a
mine,
more, again,
smiled
an
for
individual
photos,
focus.
whispered something in my ear about the appetizers being terrible.
Natural.
I laughed. It felt, briefly, like us again. Then Reed Voss walked in. I watched the shift happen in real time. Jolene's posture changed. She straightened, brightened, her whole body orienting toward him like a compass finding north. She excused herself to say hello. That was fine. Professional. Normal. Except she didn't come back. For the next hour, I stood at the edge of the room holding 2 glasses of sparkling water, watching my wife laugh with another man the way she used to laugh with me. Her hand rested on his forearm. Her head tilted close
even there
when
I
he
made the
spoke.
mistake. The difference
At
between
one
hold-
point, he said something low and private, and she pressed her fingers to her
I wasn't paying
lips,
attention, so
delighted, her eyes
accidentally did
cutting
hold instead of
briefly to
man.
me across the room. Not with guilt, but with something almost like
I wasn't paying attention.
dismissal. I set one of the
Anyway,
glasses
so
down
this is,
and
these
walked
these
over.
little
Hey,
trip ups.
I said,
like knowing
keeping my
these
voice
and then
easy.
knowing which
Thought
one
you might
to
want
use
this.
for which one.
Jolene took the glass without quite looking at me. Reed was just telling me about the Milan trip.
So all of
We're
these
thinking of
mean,
doing
like,
a whole
individual
content series
or
around it.
own, but
I nodded at
when
Reed.
do you use
He
which
gave me
one?
the kind of
And
smile that
into
doesn't reach
tests
the
speci- into
eyes.
in one
I tried to
test
join the
specifically,
conversation twice.
They are
Both
trying
times,
to
I was
pick
talked
more
over.
of these like
Not
formal,
aggressively,
old
just
style
efficiently.
ones
I was
that
being managed.
are designed,
Finally,
not designed,
I touched
but they're
Jolene's
chosen
elbow.
to kind of trip you
Maybe we
up.
should think about heading out soon.
Or even this
Chloe's got
one
an early morning. She turned then, fully, and looked at me the way you look at a slow driver in the left lane. Connor. Her voice was
And it's
smooth
like,
as polished marble.
Kakuzi,
If you're uncomfortable,
kakui,
the door's right there.
but this is
The
again
words
business
landed like a
mails,
stone dropped into still water. Reed looked
very
away.
difficult
A couple
sentences.
nearby suddenly found their drinks very interesting. I felt heat rise up the back of my neck. But underneath it,
So,
something
formal
else was
stuff,
already moving.
analytical,
Something
formal
cold
writing,
and
things like
quiet,
this.
pulling back from the shore. She didn't think I'd walk
I normally
through
use
it.
those expressions
That much
without
was
thinking, but now I
obvious.
realize Japanese is
But I
crazy.
set my glass
Well,
on a
and this
passing
is
tray, straightened my
why,
jacket,
like, again,
and without
when,
another
when
word,
people say, "Oh,
I
Japanese
turned
is
and
so
walked toward
difficult
that
or so
door.
it's
Past
really
the
not.
cameras,
The problem is it just
past
takes
the
time.
brittle
Like,
smiles,
this is the one thing that,
out into the
especially
cool
like Minchu-san.
November
Minchu-san
air.
has really good English.
As the valet brought my car around,
but it
I
depends
sat
on
behind
like
the
when we
wheel
talk
for a
about
long
grammar,
moment
like
and
Japanese
didn't
grammar
move.
specifically.
The city hummed around me. In the
In
silence,
kanji, like
I found
for
something
the
I
Joyo
hadn't
kanji,
felt in
which
months,
are the
maybe years.
2035
Clarity.
kanji.
On the drive home, I
that
stopped
you
in
learn
Chloe's
school,
room. She was asleep,
you
one
finish
arm
that in
flung
high
over her
school.
stuffed
So
elephant,
you start
her
learning
breath
kanji
soft
around
and
probably
even.
age
I
5.
stood there in the dark for a full
Hito,
minute,
ka,
just watching her,
things like
grounding
that.
myself in the
These
one
types of
thing in my
easy
life that was
kanji.
still completely
And then you
real.
finish when
Then I
you're
went to our
17,
bedroom,
18, whatever.
opened the
So
top
it's
drawer of
13
my
years of
nightstand,
public
and found it
school
almost
of
by accident. A
learning
folded note,
kanji,
edges
being
worn
around
soft with
kanji,
age.
and
I
13
recognized the
years of reading
handwriting
Shonen
before
Jump
I
or
even
whatever.
opened it.
And
Jolene's.
most
For maybe
non-Japanese
9 years
people,
back.
they don't
You made me feel
start learning
safe,
Japanese.
Connor.
Like I didn't start
Like the
learning
world can
Japanese
throw
until
whatever
I was
it wants,
23
and I don't have to be
when I
scared.
came to
I hope you
22,
know that.
23, when I
I
came
folded
to
it
Japan.
carefully
I'd
and
never
set it back in the
learned any
drawer.
before that.
Downstairs,
So I'm already
I heard her
like
key in the lock.
way behind.
Jolene
Now, the
came
good news
home
is,
at 11:40.
as adults,
I heard the
we can
garage
make
door,
connections a lot
the click of her
easier.
heels on the kitchen tile,
Kids learn
the
stuff
soft
easier
thud of her
naturally,
clutch on
but
the
we can
counter.
connect
I was in
things
the
to
living
other
room with the
information
lights low,
better. Our
a
frontal lobes
glass of
developed.
water
We
on
can
the
like
coffee table,
make these
and
connections
nothing on the
better. So
television.
there's
She
some
appeared in the
aspects that
doorway,
we can learn, like
still in
grammar
a burgundy
and things
dress,
like that, a little
her
bit easier than
expression
kids
already
can. Kids
arranged
just
into
learn
something
it
practiced,
naturally, trial and error.
concerned, slightly wounded,
While adults,
like she was the one
we
who'd been
see
wronged.
this, we
You
see
just
that
left,
structure, and
she
then we can
said.
apply that
You
structure
showed me the
to
door. I kept my
other
voice
things.
level. I used it. Her jaw tightened.
But
That's not what I meant, Connor, and you know it. You were hovering. You were
it's not
making
like
it weird.
too bad. I mean,
I was
all of
standing
them
next to my
are-
wife at a public event. You were sulking. She folded her
But even
arms,
this, like being able
shifting
to
her
read
weight.
something and then
Reed is a
always
business partner.
remembering,
This is my career. I can't have you
what
trailing after
the
me like you don't trust me.
English
I looked at her for a long
is
moment,
another thing
really
that's,
looked, and said nothing.
Because even this, I'm gonna get
Sometimes
wrong.
silence lands harder than anything
If I
you could
the
say out
English, I'm
loud.
going to translate this
She
to
filled
like,
it quickly, the way people do when the quiet
it's not
makes them
before long.
uncomfortable.
Uh,
We can talk about this tomorrow, she
first of
announced,
all. Yeah.
already
I
moving
just
toward the
changed
stairs.
the.
I'm exhausted.
I've been going through the
Good night,
flashcards and like
Jolene. She paused at the bottom of the stairs,
renewing them
as
pretty
if she
much.
expected more. A fight,
Yeah.
a plea, something to push against. When I gave her nothing, she went up. I sat there another hour, running the numbers in my head. Not emotional ones, financial ones. Over the past 4 months, I had noticed irregularities in 2 of our joint accounts. Transfers I didn't authorize, amounts that didn't line up with any household expense I could identify.
But it's just
I told
also
myself it was probably vendor
learning,
payments for the
like,
brand. Probably.
context. Or
I've been
just
telling myself
exposing yourself
probably for
to
too
more and
long.
more. So
The
again,
next
like,
morning,
I've learned more in the
after
last
dropping
3
Chloe
weeks
at
than I have
school, I drove across
probably the
town to a part
last,
of Charlotte that doesn't show up on
like,
lifestyle
2 or 3
blogs.
years.
A nondescript office
Just because
above
I'm
a tax
going
prep
through and doing
storefront,
so much.
second floor,
Like, okay, like, even
frosted
this one,
glass on the door.
This is kind of
Dale
annoying 'cause
Hutchins
you
had
look
been
at
a
the kanji
friend
and it
since
kind
our
of
college
looks like a
days at
ki or a
NC
gi
State.
or something.
Engineering
but it's actually
school,
like ikubu,
same dorm,
and you're just like,
many late nights surviving differential
even
equations
this
together.
somewhat
After
to some
graduation,
degree, some portion.
he'd gone a different direction entirely,
This relative
building a quiet
to
career in
other
private
things.
investigation,
Like if we go to
mostly
Chappie right
corporate
now,
work. Discretion was his
ChatGPT,
product. I'd
and we
referred him
say
2 clients over the years without ever thinking I'd need him
and
myself.
similar
He was at his desk when I
words,
walked in,
it's gonna
reading
come
glasses
up
pushed
with
up on his forehead,
4 or
coffee
5
going
different
cold
words that
beside his
mean
keyboard.
something.
He took one look at my face and pulled off the glasses entirely.
So
Talk to me, he said. So I did.
Yeah.
I laid it out, the
ikubu
distance, the gala, the transfers, Reed Voss, all of it.
Then somewhat.
Dale
Skoshi,
listened without
chotto,
interrupting,
tasho,
which was one of the things I'd
yaya,
always appreciated about him. When I
jakkan.
finished, he leaned back in his chair
But like
and
this,
tapped a
I
pen
learned
slowly
jakkan.
against his palm. The financial piece worries me
Jakkan,
more
jakkan,
than the personal
jakkan,
piece,
jakkan,
he said finally.
jakkan.
The personal piece I can confirm
Double K.
or deny in a week. The
But I
financial
learned
piece,
jakkan before
if
I
someone's been
learned
routing money deliberately,
ikubu.
that takes longer
like,
and leaves more
Why
traces.
did I learn?
I need to know both, I told him. He nodded
Why
once.
did I learn that one before?
Give me
this one?
10 days. I left his office and drove back through the
It's like,
city,
oh, because it's
feeling the
falling, I
strange,
want you to
hollow
know.
calm of a man who has finally
Same with
stopped
Yaya. Yaya's
pretending.
gonna be a hard one.
It wasn't peace. It was more like the moment before a storm when the birds go quiet and the
Tasho
air pressure
is
drops.
easy. Skoshi's
That
easy.
evening,
Chotto's easy.
Jolene
'Cause
was
the
already
Skoshi
in
and
performance
Chotto are
mode.
used so
Smoothie bowl on the
commonly
counter,
that those get burned in
phone
your brain
wedged
pretty
between
easy.
ear and shoulder,
And Tasho, you're like, oh,
laughing at
that's,
something on a
you
call
know,
that went quiet the
some
instant I
little,
walked
like,
into the kitchen.
somewhat.
She covered smoothly, "Let me call you back," and gave me a
But-
bright, untouched smile. "Good day," she asked. "Productive," I said,
It's just
opening
a
the
bunch,
fridge.
a bunch of
Stuart
learning.
Haynes called while I was making dinner. Stuart was my oldest business
See,
partner.
this one,
We'd co-founded the
normally,
company
I
together.
would say it's like
Though
to be
he'd moved
attached
into
to
a
something,
senior advisory
'cause you
role
see it
3 years back while I handled day-to-day
This
operations.
form
We talked twice
of
a
the word
week, easy rhythm,
means to attach
long
something,
history.
but
Except tonight something was
this
slightly
is
off.
technically new to
His
me, so
questions were a
it's
half-beat too
look
casual.
of.
The kind of casual that's actually
So,
careful.
I don't know what
He
this
asked how
means.
things
It
were going
means
with the
I need
Raleigh
to go
expansion
copy and ask
contracts.
ChatGPT tea.
Asked if I've been talking to any new investors lately. Asked, almost as an aside,
it's going to pop
whether
up,
Jolene
like,
and I had
Moon
been
and stuff
looking
like
at
that,
any
probably.
restructuring of personal assets. I
See, so
answered
this
each
is what I
question
thought
straight
originally
and gave
when
him
we
nothing
saw this
extra.
kanji.
After we hung up, I stood at the stove with the spatula in my hand and felt something cold settle in the back of my mind. Stuart knew something, or someone had been asking him questions.
See, again, too, this
Either
is
way,
using,
whatever was happening around me was bigger than one
this
bad
is not
night at
match
the gala.
look up.
I played a dinner,
So that
called
means we have to
Chloe
go
down from her
through
room, and sat across from my daughter
and
while she told
so
me about a
service
girl at
call
school
me.
who could do a cartwheel with
It's
her eyes
included with
closed.
something.
I laughed in the right places.
I forgot what this
I asked the
was.
right
Something
questions.
null.
But underneath all of it, the math was already running. Dale called me 9 days later. Not with a text, not an
State
email,
of something.
a call, which told me before he said a single word that what he'd found was worth saying out loud. We met at the same office. He had a folder on the desk when I walked in, closed, no dramatics. He waited until I sat down, then opened it and turned it to face me. Reed Voss has been in Paris twice in the last 4 months. Dale said. Both times, Jolene was there. Different flights, same hotel. I have receipts and photos. He tapped the next page. The financial transfers you flagged, 11 of them over 7 months, traced back to 2 LLCs registered in Delaware. Both filed within the last year. Both list a registered agent that connects, one layer removed,
this is why you
to a
always
holding
have to ask
company
for more
Voss
information,
controls.
because again, just
I
look
looked at the
up.
photos.
If I just
Jolene
memorize
and Reed
this,
at a
look
cafe
up,
table. Close,
there's really no point.
easy. The body
Rote
language of
memorization
people
is
who have
fine for
long
tests, and
stopped
that's
being
kind of where I'm at
careful.
too.
I felt
But if the
something
end goal
move
after
through my
the test is
chest.
to also know
Not rage,
what is going
something
on, then you have
quieter
to
and more final,
really dig
like a
into
door
this sort of
closing on a room you've been leaving for a long time. There's more,
So here
Dale
we see it.
said.
We
The
Google it
LLCs
again,
aren't just holding
and
money.
it wasn't in any
They're
of
incorporated
these
under
up
a
here.
brand name.
It
Maison
wasn't in
Voss
any of
Fontaine.
these.
Luxury home goods.
But we
Product
see it down here.
specs that
Book
overlap with your
Politsky.
company's proprietary distribution
Fulong
framework.
Gena-
Someone gave him your
Politsky.
operational playbook, Connor.
Hello, what's up, Gax?
That landed differently than the
Volodymyr
photos.
Politsky.
The photos were personal. This was surgical. How long has the brand been in development? I asked. Best estimate,
type of thing.
18 months. 18 months.
So
Jolene
whenever
and I had
add
celebrated
the
our
definition,
10th anniversary
I'm probably gonna
14
just
months
copy
ago.
this. This is
Weekend in
probably
Asheville, the inn with the
or
fireplace, the long walk
descriptive.
along the river where she told me she was grateful for everything we'd built.
if it ever
I
loads.
closed the folder and slid it back
Recently
across
it's
the
been a
desk.
bit slow.
There's one more thing, Dale said, and his voice shifted just slightly. Careful now.
Let's not have
I ran a
text.
background check on Voss
And
as
then we
standard
also want
procedure.
to add
He's not single.
a sentence
He has a
to-
partner, a man named Felix Warden. They were together for 3 years, ran a joint consulting venture. Voss dissolved it 14 months ago, same time the brand development started. From what I can tell, Warden didn't see it coming. I sat with that for a moment. Does Warden know
Ads
about
are
Jolene?
starting. My
That,
apologies. I know
Dale
ads
said,
are gross
is a
and
question
yucky,
worth
but
asking him.
they help
I
keep
drove
things
home
safe.
through Charlotte's midday traffic with the kind of
Anyway,
focus
so this
that
is what I
comes
do
when
when I
anger
study.
gets
I'm gonna
cold
lurk, be back
enough
in 30.
to
Okay,
become
cool.
strategy. That
Thanks,
evening,
we might go make
Stuart
bread or
Haynes
something
called
here in a
again.
little bit.
4th time in 2 weeks. Each call a little more pointed than the last. This time he asked directly
rain is
whether
kind
I'd been
of,
approached about selling
fizzled
off the
plans
Raleigh
today.
contracts. I hadn't,
Tomorrow I'm
but
going
someone
down
had
to
clearly
Yokosuka.
told him I
That'll
might
fun.
be open to it. I kept my voice easy and
Twitch
told him
stream,
nothing had
Twitch
come
stream on
across
the
my
monitor, who's
desk.
the fairest of them
After
all.
we hung up,
I will
I
say,
sat in the quiet of my study
I did
and
kind of
understood fully,
a little
finally, that Stuart wasn't just making conversation.
bit,
He was taking
compliment
inventory,
the other day.
figuring out what was still mine before
felt
someone
really
made a
good
move
about
on it. 2 betrayals, 1 marriage, 1
It
business.
could have been Oseji.
Both
Maybe it was
hollowed out
Oseji,
from the
but
inside while I'd been busy
Tanuki-san
trusting
said, "Wow,
people.
you look
I
so
went
good off
upstairs
camera.
and
You
checked
should
on
show your
Chloe.
face more."
She was at her desk drawing horses,
Dang,
her
thanks.
tongue pressed to the
Also,
corner of her
both
mouth
her and her
in
sister,
concentration.
Kimiya-san and Tanuki-san,
She held up the drawing
when they
without
saw me, they're
looking
like,
away
"You're
from it.
way
What do you
bigger
think,
than
Daddy?
we thought." Like,
That's
they're
the
like, "You're
best
like
horse I've ever seen.
tall and
I
big."
told her honestly. She grinned.
I
I'm
try.
going to draw you one too. I sat on the edge of her bed and watched
It's all
her
that milk
work,
I drink at
and I
night.
let that be the only thing in the world for a few minutes. Just that small, certain room, and my daughter, and the scratch of her colored pencil on paper. Then I went back downstairs and started making calls. Roland Kress had an office in uptown
48
Charlotte on the
seconds before
22nd
it's
floor
free.
with a view that was clearly designed to
Usually I've been doing
remind
like
you
10
what
to
losing
20.
felt like.
Even looking up
Floor-to-ceiling
information.
glass, the city spread out below, the man himself behind a desk the size of a small aircraft carrier. He was 52, silver-haired,
Also,
built like
I
someone
was
who'd been
really,
athletic
really hesitant
once
to
and
use
stayed
ChatGPT for a
disciplined.
long time.
His
to study,
reputation
but
was
it's
specific.
really helpful.
He didn't take
like,
cases he couldn't win,
especially when
and
you
he
ask
hadn't
very
lost a
specific
significant one in
whole key
11
on it.
years. His assistant had told me he had a 30-minute opening. He gave me 45, and by the end of it, he'd push aside 2 other files. I laid everything on the table. Dale's report, the financial transfers, the LLC registrations, the brand framework that mirror my company's proprietary systems, Stewart's suspicious behavior, the prenuptial agreement Jolene and I had signed before the wedding.
Oh,
Roland read in silence, turning pages with the unhurried attention of someone who already knew what he was looking for. When he finished, he set the folder down, steepled his fingers, and looked at me. The prenup is solid, he said. Violation of financial disclosure clause is clear. She moved marital assets without consent into entities designed to benefit a third party. That's not a gray area. He paused. The business angle is actually more damaging to her position than the personal one. Courts don't like fraud. And this, he tapped the LLC page, reads as fraud. What about Stuart Haynes? Roland's expression didn't change. If he's been providing inside information to your
I was
wife
very
or
on the fence for a long time.
that's a
I didn't
separate
want
matter,
to,
civil, potentially criminal, depending on what we find. I'd recommend a forensic accountant on your business accounts within the week. I authorized it before I left his office. That afternoon, Felix Warden agreed to meet me. Dale had made the first contact, kept it clean, just that I was someone who'd been affected by the same situation and wanted to compare notes. Felix chose a coffee shop in Noda, corner table, arrived 5 minutes early. He was lean, quiet-eyed, the kind of man who'd learned to read rooms the hard way.
Prior to this,
He didn't waste time. Voss dissolved our firm without warning, he said, wrapping both hands around his mug. 14 months ago, I put 4 years into that business. He told me the market had shifted. 2 weeks later, I found out he'd already incorporated the new brand, using half the client relationships we built together. And you didn't go after him. Felix's mouth tightened. I didn't have what I needed yet. He looked at me directly. I'm guessing you do. I slid a copy of Dale's financial summary across the table. He read it without expression, then set it down with a quiet precision that felt like controlled fury. He's been using your wife's brand reach and your operational infrastructure as the foundation, Felix said. She thinks she's a partner. She's a vehicle. She doesn't know. Voss doesn't tell people things they'd object to. He leaned back. I have records from our firm, original client lists, project frameworks he's repackaged under the new brand. Combined with what you have, it's enough to dismantle the whole structure. We talked for another hour. By the time we shook hands at the door, we had the outline of something I hadn't expected to find in the wreckage of my marriage. An alliance.
But then it's like,
that
whichever
evening,
one I'm used
Jolene
to,
was home early
and then
for
I'll
once,
just type, nothing has
moving
changed,
through the
my
kitchen
inputs are the
with easy
same.
confidence.
And then randomly,
talking on
about
the
halfway
phone
through the
about a
study
Milan
session, it'll
content
switch to the
shoot.
other one.
She smiled at me over the counter,
And then
warm,
I'm like,
practiced, the full performance. And I smiled
I'm really
back without a
annoyed
flicker.
that it's like, hey, I was
She had
reading
no
all
idea
Japanese,
that
or I
Roland
was reading all
Kress
English,
had
and now
already
you just, like,
drafted the
flip-flopped.
first legal motion.
Because
She had no
idea
idea that Felix Warden had spent the afternoon handing me the rest of the map, and she had absolutely no idea that the forensic accountant was starting on Monday.
Outside of flashcard study.
I helped Chloe with her spelling homework after dinner, her small voice sounding out syllables at the kitchen table, while Jolene laughed softly in the next room on another call. I corrected Chloe's paper, told her she'd aced it,
a Japanese person in
one thing at a
makeup
time.
To get
Jolene
them
moved
for
first.
easy profit.
I'll give her that. She had good instinct for timing, even if her judgment about everything else had gone to ruin. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 days after I'd met with Felix Warden. Chloe was at school. I was in my home office reviewing the forensic accountant's preliminary notes when I heard Jolene's footsteps on the stairs. Unhurried, deliberate, the walk of someone who'd made a decision. She appeared in the doorway in workout clothes, phone in hand, and leaned against the frame. I want to show you something, she said. She turned the phone screen toward me. It was her Instagram, pulled up to a post she'd published an hour earlier, while I'd been buried in spreadsheets. A photo of her at the gala, radiant, laughing, perfect, with a caption that made my stomach tighten on the first read. Lately I've been doing a lot of reflecting. When you pour everything into your work, your growth, your family, and the person who's supposed to be your partner responds with jealousy and silence, it's exhausting. I'm grateful for everyone who lifts me up. You know who you are. No names. Didn't need any. The comments were already stacking up. Hundreds of them. Her audience mobilizing like a small, devoted army. You deserve better, Queen. He clearly can't handle a strong woman. Some men just can't grow. She was watching me read it, measuring my reaction. I
Homemade
set the phone
potato
down on the
chips.
desk and looked at her.
Way too
You
ridiculous
turned
to
our
be true.
marriage into
Well,
content.
especially now that
I
you
share
have
my
to-
truth.
Now it's a lot
She
stricter.
replied, chin up.
This is
You
fancy
fired a
irony here.
warning shot, I said evenly.
Well,
and you
our
dressed it up
friend
as
who,
vulnerability.
gave us
That's
the
not the
idea
same
of walking
thing.
through this
Her
part
eyes
of town,
narrowed just slightly.
um,
She hadn't expected that particular red. People are allowed to
just sent me a
support
giant
me,
list and we were
Connor.
on it.
That's
Okay.
not an attack on you. No, I
Do you
agree.
think when someone is
But
at
it's the
beginning-
opening of a
in the beginning
narrative.
phase of learning Japanese,
And we
they should
both
focus
know
on
it.
quantity
I'll
of
lean back in my
words,
chair.
less time per card,
Here's
or
what I want you to
quality of words,
understand.
more time per card.
I'm not going to fight you on social media. I'm not going to post anything, respond to anything,
personally
or
think
give your audience a single frame to work with.
the reason
That
I try to get
battlefield
my
isn't interesting
time
to
per
me.
card down is
She stared
because
at me.
I'm
The
already
confidence in her
familiar with
posture
most of these
shifted
cards
just a
at this
fraction.
point. I've been studying
Not doubt
this deck
exactly.
for
More like recalibration.
100
What
new
battlefield
cards
is interesting to
for
you? She asked
100
carefully.
new cards a day.
I picked up the
for
forensic accountant's preliminary
almost 3
notes
weeks.
and set them face down in
So
the desk drawer.
I'm in like the
kind with paperwork.
thousands
I said
of
simply.
cards type
She
of
left the
situation.
room without another word. That afternoon,
I
the post had
think
14,000 likes. Her DMs were
this is
flooded
my
with
personal
support.
opinion.
3 of my professional contacts
It
texted
depends on
me.
how much time you
Careful,
have per day to study.
awkward
and it depends
messages,
on like what your end
checking
goal is.
in, not
So
quite asking.
I've been very like last
The
night.
court
one
of
my
public
clients
opinion
asked
had
me,
been convened,
they're like, "Why
and
are you
Jolene had
so
made
like,
sure she got to give the opening statement.
set
I called Roland
on
Kress
studying?"
and
I was
told him
like, 'Cause
about
I
the
have a,
post.
like
Good,
test to pass.
he said,
Like, you have no
with
other
a satisfaction
goals
that
than that. I was like, well,
surprised
of
me.
course, like
She's established a
generally
public
speaking,
record
I
of her
want to improve
framing.
my Japanese.
When the
but
financial
the
misconduct
next 2
evidence
months,
surfaces, the
passing that
contrast
test
will
is
be
my only goal.
significant.
Like
Judges are
that's
human
it.
beings.
There's a lot of stuff I'm
They
having
read
to
the room.
learn just
That
for
evening,
this test.
Carol recalled,
And
Jolene's mother,
you know, so
67,
that is the goal. The goal
sharp-tongued,
is the test.
with the particular
And
skill of making
in doing
concerns
so,
sound like
it is
indictment.
kind of an isekai
I'd always
trope, like
manage her
one,
carefully,
2 birds,
and
1
she'd
stone
always known it.
situation,
Connor,
where it's like
she said,
by studying
voice
hard for
honeyed
the
with
test,
false
I'm also
warmth.
going to
I heard
improve
things
my
have been
base
rocky.
Japanese.
Jolene's under so much
infinitely.
pressure. I
Like,
hope you're not making
way
this
more- like,
harder for
now
her
when
than
I
it
watch
needs to be.
stuff in Japanese,
Carol, I
because
said,
I've been doing so
how's your hip
many
been?
kanji
Last time
flashcards,
Jolene mentioned
I go, oh,
You've been
hey,
putting
I know
off
that
that
word. Oh, I know that
procedure.
word. Oh, I know that word.
A pause. It's been bothering
so
me,
that's kind of the
actually.
thing. In
What?
beginning,
I'm
I
glad
think
you answered, I said. I'll be in touch soon.
my advice is
I ended the call before she could redirect. I had something specific in mind for Carol, but the
get
timing
to kanji
wasn't
as
right
fast
yet.
as you can.
I filed it away.
And then
Stuart called
do
that same evening.
As many as you
Fifth
can
time in
without
3
feeling burnt
weeks.
out.
This time his questions
Because
were
again,
sharper.
too, if you're really
Had I spoken to
soaking
any
it in,
attorneys? Was I planning any changes to the company's structure? Had I
If you're
talked
really
to our
soaking
insurance
it in,
underwriter lately? Each question a
the
probe.
time per card
Each
will go
answer
down.
I gave
so
him
even when I was
landing
doing it
nowhere
earlier,
useful.
I
After we
pulled
hung
up
up,
my screenshots
texted
of
Dale.
my
Stuart's
cards per day
escalating.
type of thing.
Can you pull his financial
And
activity?
the times have gotten
Anything linking
way
him to
shorter
Voss
recently.
or the
The first couple of
LLCs?
weeks, it was like
Dale's
it was
reply
taking me
came back
3
in 4
hours
minutes.
to do
Already running it.
fewer
Give me
cards
48
because I
hours.
was like, I
I
kept
went
getting them
upstairs
wrong.
and sat on the
I
edge of
kept,
Chloe's
like, not
bed
remembering.
while she
I
showed me a
kept,
book
like,
about marine animals
you know.
she checked out from the school
Because
library.
for me, when I do cards,
She read me
I
3 pages
verbally
about
say it out
octopuses
loud,
with total authority,
the reading of it,
correcting her own pronunciation
and then
twice
I
without
verbally
prompting.
say
I listened
the
to every
English
word like it
out
was the
loud
most
to
important
myself
thing
if
I'd
I'm
heard
like
all
inside
week.
my house.
Because honestly, it was.
And
The Piedmont Business
me,
Forum was the kind of event
you know,
where
if I'm able to do
Charlotte's
that pretty
power
quickly,
structure showed up to
and then if I
remind
get it
itself
wrong, I immediately send
existed.
it to the
Developers,
again phase.
financiers,
So even if it's
tech
something I've gotten
founders,
right,
a few local
now I will say
politicians
there's
who
been
wore their
sometimes I've fat
ambitions like
fingered,
pocket
like
squares.
an honest
It
fat
happened
fingering,
every
where it's like,
quarter
oh, I
at the
accidentally
Valentine
type like
Hotel,
HU
and I'd attended
versus
reliably
H,
for 8 years. This quarter,
or like
I had a
KI
different
versus
reason for
KO.
going.
Like I'm just
Arthur
trying
Weston
to do
had
that.
confirmed
In that
2 days
situation,
prior. 63
and I
years
know
old,
it was a fat finger because then I
Silver-haired,
read
the
the
founder
input,
and former
this is another thing
CEO
I
of
did
Weston
for my
Capital
Anki.
Group, a
And
name
you-
that
I
opened
use ChatGPT
doors in
for this
14
too.
states and
I
got
made
mentioned
it
in the
where
same
I
breath
have
as
to
Warren
physically
Buffett
type in
in
either
certain
the
Charlotte
kanji or
circles.
the.
He'd
I guess I don't
semi-retired
have
to a
to,
board
but,
advisory role, but his presence at any
like this.
event
So we
still
just did this
shifted
one
the
earlier,
center of
and
gravity
I
in the
messed
room.
this one up.
He'd
so
reached out
it's
to
gonna
me
be
through a mutual contact after Felix
so,
Warden had quietly let it be
so
known that Voss's new venture
the
had
reason I
burned an
have them both
investor who
here,
knew
but
Weston
see, I don't-
personally. The
I
connection
just-
had taken
just
one
did this
phone
one
call
where
to
we forgot
make, and exactly no
And
convincing.
this is one that's been.
Weston was
this
already
is a,
at the
this
bar
card
when
is
I
a leech.
arrived,
It's been around
nursing
for
a
a long
club
time.
soda, watching the room with the calm attention of a man man who'd long since stopped needing to impress
after
anyone.
all, finally,
He shook my hand with a grip that meant business. I looked into your situation.
In the beginning or something,
skipping pleasantries
So
entirely.
as long as I get the meeting
Voss
somewhat
approached
right.
2 members of my investment network last year.
So
with a
first
brand
of all, in
pitch.
the beginning,
Used your company's distribution
I
framework
said finally
as the
is
proof
not
of
correct at all.
concept for scalability.
So for this, even
His
though
voice
like,
was even, but
I'm
his
probably gonna
eyes
put
were
this
cold.
at hard
He
or
presented it
against
as
because,
proprietary
like,
work his team had
fucked up.
developed.
I know the
My people
general
passed,
meaning of the
fortunately,
word,
but I don't
but it's
forget.
not to the liking
I'm not
that I
asking you
want.
to fight my
And
battles.
so,
I told him.
again,
I know you're not. Weston said.
But this
I'm
is
here
honestly,
because this affects my
Hitomazu
net worth
is
credibility,
a lot
and
like
because I don't like
Toriyazu,
watching a
probably.
man get robbed in his own house. He swirled his soda.
Leeches are
What
a
do you
weird
need from
situation
me
where it can be
tonight?
argued if you should
Your
focus on
presence,
really trying to get
I
the word
said,
or just accept
in
that it will
one
take a while and use the
conversation.
time to learn new
We
stuff.
moved through the room
I agree
together,
with that.
and I want to be
Again,
clear
if I
about what that
wasn't
looked
trying
like
to
because it mattered.
pass
Arthur
a very
Weston
specific
didn't need
test,
to announce himself.
and I didn't think
People
there
came
are
to him.
some cards like
Within
what
20
was,
minutes of our arrival, 3 of
was
Voss's
a
current
word that
investors had
popped
found their
up.
way into our orbit.
There was a
drawn by
whole
Weston's
section that
gravity.
was like talking
The
about
conversations
science
were polite,
and,
general,
it
about
was
market
like,
conditions and due diligence standards.
well,
But Weston had a
Hanshoku or
way of
something,
raising a single
and it
precise
was like
question.
breeding,
Have you stress tested
captivity,
the IP
stuff like that. And I'm
provenance
like,
on that venture?
I
And
got
watching
it
it
right,
land like a
the
stone
reading,
in
and I was like,
still
okay,
water.
next.
Jolene
Even if I get
arrived
that one
40
wrong,
minutes in.
I almost
Reed
never
Voss
send
at her
it to the
side.
very beginning.
Both of
I'll
them
send it to
glossy
like
and
the
confident.
hard or
She
good.
saw me from across the room. Her
Because it's like,
expression registered surprise.
I know I'm not.
Then
Like in a
adjustment.
test, I'll look
She
at it
hadn't
and I can tell by
expected
the
me
sentence.
here.
Oh yeah,
hadn't
that's that
expected
one
Weston's
word.
hand on my shoulder.
But for me doing
hadn't
flashcards, I'm like,
expected
I don't
the
really
particular
need to
quality
know,
of
like,
attention the room was giving our corner.
gene
I watched Reed
sequencing
Voss
or
spot
whatever the fuck
Weston.
popped up.
His
You know
smile
what I mean?
didn't
Like,
falter,
I don't really,
but something behind it did. Later
I
in
don't
the
really
evening,
need to know that one.
I
So,
found myself near the
I
entrance
kinda
when
go past that
Jolene
one.
approached alone.
But for this
Voss
stuff, like
momentarily
Hitomazu, like I
occupied.
know this is gonna
She
pop
stopped
up.
in front
like
of
I
me.
know it's pretty common
Voice
when you
low.
look it up. It's
What are you
like
doing with Weston?
it's
Catching
used
up,
quite a lot.
I said.
So if I
We have
feel like I'm
mutual
going
interests.
to use it,
Her
then I
eyes
make
searched my
sure,
face.
even if it's a leech,
Connor,
I make sure it gets
whatever
back in.
you think
Like
you're
there's
doing.
one later.
I'm attending a professional
It's
event.
gonna be
I said pleasantly.
um
You told me the door was right there, Jolene. I used it.
like
Turns out there
even
were
like,
better
this
rooms
is
on the other
Kyo-
side. Her jaw tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it. A rarity. Across the room, I saw
See,
one of
but had
Voss's
I got that
investors
one
pulling
wrong,
aside. Their body
I
language
probably would have
shifting from
done
social
it
to
at
serious.
the hard.
Voss's
and not
phone
the
came out.
Good or
The
evil.
frown that crossed his
Because I
face
know
was
this
small
is. I
but
know what it
real.
means.
I
know it
excused
means
myself
like
from
professor,
Jolene without
lecturer,
another word and
academic
returned to Weston,
related.
who handed me a
But
club
it's like
soda.
I will
and said
never
quietly,
ever
his funding conversation
use this.
just got complicated.
Outside of this test.
I nodded once.
This word
The next
means
morning,
nothing to me.
I had Roland Crest file the
'cause
first formal motion.
Most of the people are
Prenup
going to say,
violation,
"Oh, Daigaku no
financial
sensei,
misconduct,
Daigaku
custody
no
petition.
nanto-" You're like,
And before
they're not gonna
Jolene saw a single
probably use
document,
Kyoju
I called a
that
journalist
often.
at the Charlotte Business
So,
Observer I'd
it's
worked
like-
with twice before. I gave him nothing on the
knowing
record.
it, and then again,
Just
if I
enough
see
on
it in
background
a
to
sentence,
start asking the right questions
you
about
know,
a
it would
new
be
luxury brand
Daigaku
and the
ni
provenance of its
Kyuju-
operational framework.
Kyoju,
The story
Kyoju
ran 4 days
got
later.
90.
Jolene
I'm like,
read
oh, okay,
it
well,
over her morning
university.
coffee.
This guy
I watched her face go still.
does something. Okay,
The
this
color
guy's
pulling back.
he's either a
the
student or a
performance
teacher.
dropping
But
for
because
just a
we have
moment.
the word kyo,
And then she looked at me across the kitchen
which means
table with something
educate,
in her eyes
and
I
we see
hadn't
it with
seen
teachers.
before.
But okay, he's a
Not
teacher
anger.
of some kind.
Fear.
That's
The
it.
Charlotte
Context
Business
figured out.
Observer
We're done.
story
On to the
ran
next
on a
one.
Thursday
So,
morning.
You know,
And by noon it had been picked up by two
things like
regional
this
business
though.
wires.
Hinyari, I think
The
Hinyari
headline
is
was
to
careful.
cool down.
Questions
or chilly
surround new
or,
luxury brands,
something
IP
like that.
origins. But the substance
cool,
was
chilly,
precise.
nice and cold.
A new
Hinyari
venture
shita
called Maison
kuki
Vos
no
Fontaine,
seide,
launched
Tomo wa
quietly over the past 18 months,
ishiki
whose
o
operational framework bore significant
Kaifuku shita?
structural resemblance to proprietary systems
he
developed
regained-
by an
okay.
established Charlotte
because
logistics
of the
firm.
cool air.
Sources unnamed. Questions
Tom
unanswered. Jolene called me
returned
4
to
times
normal.
before I finished my first cup of coffee. I let all
Tom
4
was
go to
rejuvenated.
voicemail. She appeared in the kitchen doorway 20 minutes later,
like this
still
case,
in her robe,
it's like,
her
okay,
phone in
this
one
one
hand,
I may
and
or
a
may
fury
not
in
need,
her
'cause-
eyes. She
but
wasn't
again, too,
bothering
it's
to contain.
fairly common.
You did this,
to
she
see these
said,
things.
her voice low and sharp. I looked up from my laptop. Good morning. Don't. She crossed
So
the
it
room
just- I mean, just
and
going
set her
through
phone
that,
on the table in front of me. The article
But I
pulled
will
up
say,
on the
I think
screen.
for a lot of people,
You fed
they
this to a
end up-
journalist. You deliberately went behind my back to destroy
if you're
something I
doing
spent 2
Anki,
years building.
That's great.
You
I think a
spent
lot of
2
people
years building
delay
it with my
kanji,
operational
and that
framework
blows my
and my
mind
marital
when I
assets.
talk to some people.
I said evenly.
Even when I talk to people
Those
who
are
lived in
2
Japan
things
for
that
a long
belong
time,
to me.
and they're
Her
like,
jaw
oh, it's so
tightened.
hard.
You have no idea
but
what
have you
Reed
ever,
and
like,
I have a very detailed
actually
idea.
tried to study?
I
Like,
said,
actually,
14
even for
pages of
myself,
it. Actually,
I have never
prepared by a
before
forensic
this, I've never
accountant.
actually
The color
studied.
shifted in her
Like,
face. Not
I'm
all
going
at
to
once.
open up a book. I'm
It
going to
drained
do
from
this.
the edges
I tried doing
inward,
Genki a long
the
time
way a
ago.
photograph
I
fades
hated
when
it.
it's left in the light
Hated it,
too
hated
long.
it. I don't
She pulled
like
out the chair
Genki
across
at
from
all.
me and sat
I
down,
think they
which which told me the
maybe
confrontation
Genki
had
2 is different,
changed
but
registers.
Genki 1
She
does
was
one
no
of the
longer
worst
performing for an
things
invisible
in Japanese
audience.
teaching that I
She
think
was
you could
thinking,
possibly do.
Connor,
And
her
that
voice
is it
dropped.
misassigns,
We can fix this.
I
We
don't
can
know
get in
if
front of
misassigns
it
is the right word.
together. I'll cut ties with Reed,
It
restructure the brand, put everything back into joint accounts. We go to a real
messes up with the
therapist,
Romaji.
not that
And
Beverly
for
Hills
beginners,
circus.
you probably
We
shouldn't
work.
be doing Romaji anyway.
She reached across the
but
table,
for
her
someone
fingers
to
brushing
see
my
the Romaji
forearm.
messed up
You
early,
and me. We were good
very
once.
early,
We could be good again.
When you can
I looked at her
clearly
hand on
see
my
the
arm.
hiragana,
Then I looked at
like
her
one of the
face,
ones they do that really,
and I saw
really
something
bothers
genuine
me.
there, which made it harder, not easier. Jolene, I said quietly, I found the correspondence. The plan you and Reed built 18 months ago, before you came to Asheville with me for our anniversary, and told me you were grateful for everything we'd built. I paused. That wasn't a rough patch. That was a performance. Her hand withdrew. The softness left her eyes. Fine. Her voice hardened back into steel. You want to do this the hard way. Then think about what it does to Chloe. Think about what a public divorce does to her at school, to her friendships, to her sense of who her family is.
Because
think about
this is
whether winning
sensei,
this fight
sensei,
is
sensei.
worth what it
Hiragana,
cost her
katakana,
daughter.
kanji. Okay?
She was watching me
And
carefully,
in that book,
measuring
they
whether it would
write it
land.
as...
I sat with it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I leaned forward,
gross.
elbows on the table, and met her eyes without blinking. Don't use our daughter as a bargaining chip, I said. That's the one move that tells me everything I need to know about where you are right now. Chloe's welfare is why I've handled this the way I have.
I'm not going to read
carefully, quietly, and legally.
They write it like this.
Everything I've done has been to protect her
Blue Fox
future,
Studio?
not yours
They write it
or
like
mine.
this.
I stood up slowly.
And this
Roland
bugs
Kress
the shit out of
filed
me
the
because
formal
it
motions
should be
yesterday morning. You want to call your
the
attorney.
correct
She stared at me. Her mouth
is
opened
this.
once, closed.
sentence.
She hadn't
that you-
expected that.
And you're just
any of
like,
it. Not the calm, not
what
the
the fuck
preparation,
is going on?
not the fact
Or
that I'd
even another
anticipated
thing
her
too, and
emotional
this
play
isn't
and
as
walked
bad,
right through it
But
without
words
breaking
that are
stride.
supposed to be like,
I picked up my laptop and my coffee and left the room. That evening, I drove to
you?
Carol Wren's house
sometimes
in
they'll
Dilworth,
do with
a tidy colonial she'd owned for 20
2
years,
O's.
hydrangeas
And you're
along the
like,
front walk. She answered the door in
nah,
her
that's
house
not right.
dress,
Like, that's
surprised and visibly
That's
wary.
not how it should
Connor,
be. And
I
so
wasn't
again,
expecting.
maybe in Genki 2
I know.
they
I
changed
said,
that. But
"May
in
I
Genki
come in?"
1, I remember
I
looking
sat
at it and
across
I was
from her
like,
at the
this
kitchen
is
table and told her
weird.
plainly
Like, why,
I knew about her
why
hip
is this a
replacement,
thing?
that she'd been putting it
Because
off
again,
for
it's so
18
confusing
months
for a
because of the
brand
cost
new
after her
beginner
supplemental
level
insurance
Japanese
lapsed.
person.
I slid an envelope across
They're
the
going
table.
to read
A letter from my attorney confirming that the
going
procedure
to
would be
read
fully covered through a private arrangement I'd
the
made with her
English.
surgeon's office. No
Period.
strings.
As a
no
brand new
conditions.
beginner,
Carol looked at the
most
envelope
people
for a
are
long
going
time.
to hold on
Why?
to the English.
She asked finally.
Myself
Because
included.
you're Chloe's grandmother.
They're going to hold on
I
to the
said,
English as long as they
and
can.
because whatever happens between Jolene
So then
and
it's
me,
like,
that doesn't change. She pressed her lips together. Her
why
eyes
would you
went
include
bright.
a misspelling
She didn't offer
of
to
it?
testify against her daughter.
Because even
I hadn't
this,
asked her
okay,
to,
like
but
this
3
is,
days
this is another
later,
thing. They're like,
Carol
oh, well,
called
double E
Jolene,
makes the same
and
sound.
whatever she said in that
Yeah,
conversation,
but for a lot of people,
Jolene
they're
arrived
gonna say,
home that evening
"Cincy?
quieter than I'd seen her
Cincy?
in months.
Hey, Cincy
Some things
Martian."
don't need to be engineered.
And it's like,
they just need to be honest. Reed Voss made his
maybe
move on a
say,
Friday evening.
like Sensei,
The kind of move
but
that
it's
looks
like,
decisive from the
most
outside
people are
and
not
feels from
sounding
the
this
inside,
shit out. They're
like
not
panic wearing
going
a
to
good
go
suit.
through this.
Stuart
and you're
Haynes
just
called
kinda
me
like,
at 6:15. Not a probe this time. His voice was different, lower, stripped of its usual managed
Hiroka.
ease.
So here,
Connor,
that's another. That's
I
a
need
very
you to hear
interesting
me
one.
out,
Like even
he
Hiro,
I'm listening.
Like Hiroka,
A long
Hiroka,
pause. I made a mistake.
Depending on like
A
even there, I
significant
said it
one.
2 different ways.
Voss approached me
Hiroka,
14 months
Hiroka.
ago.
The
Told
second
me you
one,
were planning to sell the company,
Hiroka.
restructure,
And it's like
that he was working with
being able
Jolene on a
to
transition plan.
differentiate between those.
He needed
as
insight
well.
into the Raleigh contracts and the distribution
Like,
framework.
It just takes time.
I thought
to,
he stopped. I thought I was
practice
protecting my
those types of
position.
things.
I said nothing. I know that doesn't justify it, Stewart continued. I've already retained an attorney. I wanted you to hear it from me before the forensic
This type of
report
crap
lands.
bothers me a lot.
It already
And that's
landed.
why, like, I know
Stewart,
there's
I
a
said,
pretty popular
3 days
YouTuber
ago.
that does
The silence on his end was complete.
Genki
I'll
textbook
cooperate
stuff.
fully,
And I
he
need
said
to,
finally.
If I ever have
Whatever
the chance
you
to
need.
meet him one day,
I ended the
hey,
call, set the phone on my desk,
why
and
Genki
stared at the
textbooks?
middle
If you're
distance for a
sponsored,
moment.
I get it.
11 years
But, like,
before that, Stewart
I mean,
and I
maybe
had
they're
stayed
good,
up
maybe they
until
get
2 in the
better.
morning
Maybe I
in a
need to
rented
give it
office
another
on
crack
South Tryon
and,
Street, building the company's
get through
first
it,
client
but
proposal on a whiteboard with a
at this
dried out
point,
marker.
too, like my
I remembered
levels are
arguing
low.
about the font on the cover
Genki one,
page.
So
I filed the memory away and
learning
moved
grammar
on.
in isolation is
2 days
overrated.
later, Voss's world
Well,
came
it's,
apart with the kind of
it
speed
has
that
its
only
time
happens when multiple structural
for tests, it
failures
has
occur
its points.
simultaneously.
But any
Felix
other,
Warden submitted his
like
IP
that's the thing with the
documentation
flashcards.
package
That's why I've been
to
adding
2
in
of Voss's
tons of
primary
sentences because
investors. Detailed,
absolutely,
time-stamped,
just doing flashcards
irrefutable.
of grammar is
Within 48
kind
hours,
of crazy.
both investors had
If you're not
frozen their
learning it within
positions
sentences.
and retained independent counsel. By Tuesday morning,
Again, like
a third
what I'm
investor,
doing right now for the
one of the
test
men Wesson had
is
spoken with at the Piedmont Forum,
a bit
had
different
quietly
because
pulled
I'm
out
just
entirely.
trying to,
Voss called
you know,
Jolene
pass this
repeatedly
test,
that
and
week.
unfortunately,
She answered the first
because
two
I'm having
times.
to catch up on
After
so
the
much
third
grammar,
call,
there's really
she
no
stopped
choice
picking
but
up.
to like
Then came the wire fraud
do
flag.
that. But I
Dale
also
had flagged
have
it
exposure
first.
enough to
An
the
attempted
language
transfer
the last
of
10 years that it's like,
$340,000
I
from the
can
Maison
guess
Vosfontaine
some
operating
things a
account
lot of
to
time.
an offshore entity registered in the Cayman Islands. The
Doesn't
transfer
always
had been
work,
initiated
obviously,
on a Sunday
but
night.
it's, the more
By
I'm
Monday
learning,
morning,
the more accurate
the
my
forensic
guesses are
accountant's
becoming.
report had already been in Roland Kress's hands, which meant that Voss's attempt to move money ahead of the legal proceedings was
Anyway, the
documented
TLDR,
almost in
week,
real
so
time. Federal
I think,
investigators opened a preliminary inquiry by Wednesday. Voss's attorney
I think in the
issued a
beginning,
statement.
it's just do as
Then
many
Voss
as you
himself
can.
went silent.
The
No
sheer
posts,
number, I think, is better
no
versus
calls,
the.
no appearances. Charlotte's
But
social
again, it
circuit
depends on how people
registered
are
his
doing fetch
absence
hunts
the
as
way
well.
a body
Like, if it's
registers
just
a removed
in isolation,
splinter. A
it's the
small
same thing with
relief,
WaniKani. Like
a slight soreness
I have the
where it had
lifetime
been.
thing for WaniKani.
I didn't watch any of it with satisfaction.
And
I
it's
watched it
pretty
the
good
way
app,
you watch
but
a
the thing
controlled
that
demolition,
absolutely
standing at a safe
like
distance,
bothers me,
confirming that the
super
structure
bothers
has
me,
come
is, like,
down
I
where you
hate
calculated it
that
would,
I have to learn
making
the
sure no
radicals
one innocent is caught
with
in the
their
debris. The night the
mnemonics.
news broke publicly about the federal
Mnemonics are a
inquiry,
powerful tool.
Jolene came to me in the study. No performance
Like
this time.
I made up one
no
the other
strategy.
day for the kanji.
She stood in the doorway and looked at me with
means,
something that was close
it's
to the
stalk
woman I'd
or a
married.
stem of a plant.
Tired, unguarded,
And I kept getting
stripped
it
of the
wrong. And I was
gloss.
like, fuck, dude, like,
I didn't
I'm never
know
gonna
about
get
the
this.
offshore
And I'm
account,
like, oh,
she said. I believe
that's
you.
not a
I told
cookie.
her.
It's
She
a plant.
blinked,
So I'm
as
like,
if she
okay,
hadn't
not a
expected
cookie
that
equals a
either.
plant.
It doesn't change what you didn't know
And
about.
whatever, it
I
fucking
added.
worked, and now I don't.
But I
get that
believe
one
you
wrong
on that
anymore.
specific point.
And
She nodded once,
it's not
slowly,
kooky, like,
and left the room.
kooky or
Upstairs,
It's
Chloe
kooky.
was asleep with her stuffed elephant
But
under one
because of that
arm
dumb little
and a
mnemonic
library
I
book
made
about
for
dolphins
myself,
open on the pillow
I
beside
remember that
her.
word, and I'm probably
I
not
closed the
gonna
book
forget it anymore.
gently,
But
tucked the
whenever I have
blanket
to
around her
like
shoulders, and stood there in the
memorize
quiet of
the
a room for a
WaniKani
long time.
radical
Roland Kress called in the morning.
mnemonics,
The
I'm like,
custody hearing was set.
this is dumb.
Everything was
this
in place.
Isn't even
The courtroom in the
right,
Mecklenburg
you know, it's not
County
even
Courthouse
correct
was
with what
smaller
it
than I'd
matches
expected
with.
for
So why am I
something that
doing
had
this?
occupied so much of my life
I know
over
the current
past
meta is
several
brute force
months.
learning 1 to 2
Wood
k vocabulary
paneling,
frequency
fluorescent
order,
overhead
then
light,
transitioning into
the
hybrid
faint
sentence
smell
mining.
of recycled air
I
and old
wonder
paper.
if Shablo
Roland Kress
Shablo
sat beside
may
me
not
at the
be
plaintiff's
into it.
table, his suit pressed to a
Shablo has been
geometric precision,
studying
a yellow
fairly
legal pad in front of
consistently for
him
the past
with
little
3
bit.
lines of
And,
notes that I suspected were largely decorative.
He
didn't need notes.
Always, that is
He had the
one
whole
thing
thing
that
organized in his
when
head.
he comes into
Across
chat
the
and I'm doing some
aisle,
studying, he'll
Jolene's
like
legal
say, "Oh, it's a
team,
top 4K
2
word,
attorneys
top
from a
6K
prominent
word."
Charlotte firm, had arranged a
and go from
significant
there.
volume
But
of paperwork in a way that communicated industry
yeah, the first
without quite
1,000,
conveying
2,000
confidence.
vocab is
Jolene sat between them in a charcoal dress,
it can be a slog.
hair
Like, it can
pulled
be just
back,
like.
composed in the way of someone who has rehearsed
But
composure
the cool thing
rather
is,
than
once you
felt
know,
it.
like,
She didn't look at me when I sat down.
I don't know how many I would
Her
say
mother,
now.
Carol, was seated in the gallery. She told
Once you
Jolene
know
she
a
was
couple
coming for
thousand,
support. She
then
hadn't
when
specified
when you look
whose.
at new words,
The
you're
proceedings
like,
took the
I think
better
I can
part of
guess
2
that meaning,
days.
or I can get pretty close
Jolene's
to
team
the
led
reading
with
of
the
it,
standard framing.
even having never seen
Devoted
it before.
mother, ambitious professional,
Or those two
a woman whose
put
husband
together
had grown
before,
distant
I can
and
guess that
resentful
these
as her
two put together
success
equals
outpaced
this.
his comfort.
So,
They brought in
you
a
know,
character witness,
that's kind of cool.
one of her brand collaborators,
That's pretty
who
neat.
testified about Jolene's
Like I
warmth
said, the
and
problems that I'm
dedication
having right
with the
now,
smooth
that I hit
reliability
a
of
wall a
someone
couple
who'd
days
been
ago. I hit a
well-briefed.
wall, and it's
Roland let them
with this
finish.
stuff.
Then he opened his binder.
This
The
stuff right here.
financial misconduct evidence was presented methodically.
Haraga
11
kimaru,
transfers,
haruo
2
kimeru.
Delaware LLCs,
They mean
the
both
direct
mean to like
link
make up
to
your mind,
Voss's
but
holding company. The
one of them
forensic
is like
accountant's
actually
timeline showing that the transfers began
making up your
22 months
mind, and one of
prior,
them is like the
4 months
decision to
before
make
our
up your
10th
mind.
anniversary in Asheville. The prenup violation wasn't argued. It was demonstrated, page by page, figure by figure. Then came the business fraud component. Roland introduced Felix Warden's IP documentation alongside the Maison Vosfontaine Incorporation filings, showing the overlap between my company's proprietary distribution framework and the new brand's operational structure. He presented Arthur Weston's written statement, 3 paragraphs, precise and damning, confirming that Voss had pitched Weston Capital's network using frameworks he'd represented as original proprietary work. Jolene's attorneys objected 4 times.
All right.
The judge sustained none of them. Stuart Haynes had submitted a written cooperation statement the previous
This is
week.
the
It was
stuff
entered
up top
into the
is
record.
what's gonna.
Jolene,
That's
hearing her
what's
name
kind of
linked
make or break at
explicitly
this
to the
level.
scheme through Stuart's account, pressed her lips together so tightly they went white at the edges. The custody component was quieter
But also, if you do the
decisive.
pre-built decks,
Chloe's
I
school
might
counselor
actually,
testified about Chloe's emotional
when I'm done with this
stability
deck,
and her
I
strong,
might actually
consistent
give it to my
attachment
viewers.
to her father. My
'Cause
documented
it is
presence,
a
school
modified
pickups,
version
medical
of-
appointments, parent-teacher
See if I can find
conferences,
it.
was entered as a complete record going back 3 years. Jolene's absences, cataloged without
I
editorializing,
think it's this one.
spoke for themselves. When the judge delivered her ruling on the second
so
afternoon,
I have this
the
book,
courtroom was very still.
and the
Full
Shinkansen
physical
books are very
custody
good
to Connor
for-
Fontaine. Supervised
Shinkansen,
visitation for Jolene Fontaine,
are very
with a
good
review
for
hearing
doing
in
these
9
things.
months contingent
have
on
this one.
demonstrated stability. The marital estate to be divided in
And,
accordance with prenuptial terms, with additional financial penalties applied for documented misconduct. The business fraud component referred to the appropriate civil authorities.
This is something too. Like when I
Roland
first read
capped
this, I was
his
like, "Oh,
pen
this is not a
and
problem." I have
gathered
to
his
constantly
papers
edit cards.
without celebration.
I
I
do
sat
too.
very still for a moment, letting the
If you learn
ruling
this deck, you
settle.
learn the
No
wrong
fist
meanings for words
pump,
and sound like a buffoon.
no exhale of
that
triumph.
part's not true.
Just a quiet
The
acknowledgement that
guy
something enormous had
is
concluded,
copy pasting,
and that what
from
came next
whatever
was
stuff,
going to
but
matter more than what
I
had
have
just
been
ended.
going through and
In the hallway
painstakingly,
afterward,
like,
Carol Wren
updating
caught up
these
with
things.
me near the elevator.
So
She looked older than she had at her kitchen table 2 weeks ago,
I do
or
plan
maybe
on
just more
probably-
honest. You're a good father, she
I'm also
said
going to
simply.
combine this.
Her
with
voice was
another
steady,
deck
but her
that I'm
eyes
gonna
were
build
tired.
myself,
Whatever
and then
else,
I'll probably give it
you've always
to
been that. I
viewers
thanked
and
her and
stuff.
meant it. Jolene was
problem is
escorted out
it's,
through a side corridor, her attorneys flanking her. I caught one glimpse of her face before the door closed. The mask was gone, and what was underneath looked like someone standing in the ruins of a plan that had been years in the making and minutes in the unraveling. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt
See,
something
like this-
closer to sorrow. Not for myself,
This one was something
but for
I
the
had to
waste
do
of it all.
because
Reed
in
Voss,
his, it was like a
by that
box.
point, had surrendered his passport
But even
voluntarily
he
as
kinda-
condition of
we're
the
talking about
federal
publishers are meant to
inquiry's
be
terms.
cross-referenced with the
The
examples
preliminary
provided in the
wire
textbook.
fraud
Please refer to
investigation
textbook
had
contents
expanded
as
in
the
scope.
publisher's definitions
His attorneys were
before
managing an
blindly judging for
increasingly
errors.
complicated
So
situation,
this is like some people
and
who
Charlotte's
download this
business
thought it's just
community
a perfect
had developed
thing,
a
but no, this is
collective
supposed to be
amnesia
used
about
in
ever
conjunction
having
with this
thought
book.
highly of him. I drove to Chloe's school and picked her up myself, early, with permission from the front
Probably
office.
make that one
She
and then
came
the
running
one
out in her
below.
jacket with her backpack bouncing and a drawing in her hand. "Daddy, I made a horse for you today.
Where's
A
the
brown
other
one."
that I had?
I crouched down and took the drawing, looked
I'll
at it with the
probably
full
make
attention it
another
deserved.
deck to
That,
myself,
I
and,
said,
you know,
is the finest horse in
go for
North
it. But
Carolina.
I don't want it to be.
She threw her arms
downloadable
around my
for
neck,
everybody.
and I held
wanna
on.
only give it
8
to
weeks after the ruling, I
people
bought back the rights to the
that are
Maison
people
Voss
who
Fontaine
do
brand name through the bankruptcy
'Cause I'm not
proceedings
trying to
that
get
followed the
roasted by
collapse of
strangers.
Voss's holding company.
on my Anki
The
deck.
brand had been incorporated
I
using
don't-
my
I don't need
framework.
that in my life
It
right
seemed
now.
only right that it should
Actually, I don't
dissolve
need
under
that in
my
life
authority.
ever, but
I didn't repurpose it. I closed it, filed the paperwork on a Tuesday afternoon, shook hands with the bankruptcy trustee, and drove home. Felix Warden and I had been meeting regularly since the proceedings concluded. What had begun as a shared grievance had
Okay,
become,
let's see.
quietly and practically, something worth building on.
Uh,
Felix had genuine expertise in brand development and client strategy. I had infrastructure and capital and, as it turned out, a logistics company with room to grow in new directions. We signed a formal partnership agreement on a Friday morning in Roland Kress's conference room, Roland witnessing with his characteristic expression of a man who finds competence mildly satisfying. The Haynes situation resolved through civil arbitration. Stewart agreed
That
to a
didn't work out,
financial
that's all.
settlement
Thank you very much.
covering the
So,
value of the
good luck with work.
proprietary information
Thank
disclosed,
you for dropping in.
plus legal
Thanks
costs.
Thanks for
He
stopping by.
resigned from his
It's
advisory
super
role the
rainy
same
today,
week.
so I
We didn't speak again after the settlement was signed. That chapter closed without ceremony, which was the right
I'll be
way
outside
for it to
tomorrow. I'll make
close.
this house.
Jolene moved to a condo
One of my
in
friends
South
sent
End.
me a list of
Her
places
Instagram
to
went
this town
quiet
that
for
we're
nearly
going
3
to
weeks after the ruling.
in 2
An eternity
weeks,
for a woman
so
whose professional identity was built on continuous
little
presence.
walkabout going
When
on.
she did return, the content was different,
Very
smaller,
excited.
more personal. Whether that was genuine recalibration or a new strategy, I couldn't say. I stopped trying to read it either way. Carol Runn had her hip procedure in late November. Chloe and I sent her flowers and a card that Chloe had decorated with horses and stars. Carol called to thank us, and we talked for
Yeah,
20 minutes
an
about
hour and a
nothing in
half.
particular. Chloe's school play, a recipe
Good.
Carol wanted to try, whether the hydrangeas would come back strong in
Nat
spring.
Brew.
The kind of conversation that doesn't mean anything
Nat
significant
Brew.
and means everything real.
All this stuff.
The
is really
visitation
close to
arrangement
there.
was uncomfortable at
Keys
first,
Cafe.
for
Keys
Jolene,
Cafe's
for
cheap,
Chloe,
that's what I thought.
and yes, for me, watching my daughter try to navigate the
On
new
tap,
geography
bottle,
of her
and
family.
merch.
But Chloe was
Hey,
resilient
back lady.
in the
Good to
way
see you. Hello,
children
hello.
are
I need to
when they have
message you
one
back.
steady
I
parent
think I'm
to
okay.
orient around. She adapted. She asked her questions when she had them, let them go when they were answered, and kept drawing her horses. I never spoke badly of
Yeah.
Jolene
No,
to
I'm just coming
Chloe.
tomorrow to hang
Not
out.
once.
There's no
Whatever
no
Jolene
need
had done to our
bring me anything. I
marriage,
really appreciate
she was
it,
still this
but,
child's
just come
mother,
and hang out tomorrow.
and I wasn't going to let my daughter carry that weight. One Saturday in December, Chloe and I drove out
Because I
to
was
a
telling
farm
Joni too, like
east of
if I don't come
Charlotte.
down tomorrow,
Her idea, following
it'll
months of
be
research she'd done with the single-minded
months before I
determination of
can-
an
I can come
8-year-old
down
with a
there.
clear objective. She spent 3 hours with a patient mare named June, learning to brush her down and feed her carrots from a flat palm. On the drive back, Chloe fell asleep in the back seat with her head against the window and a small smile still on her face. I drove through the last of the Carolina afternoon light, the road easy and open ahead, and thought about the man I'd been 18 months ago, waiting, enduring, telling himself that patience was the same thing as strength. It isn't. I know that now. Patience without honesty is just a slower way to disappear. What I had now wasn't a perfect life. It was something more durable than that, a real one, built on ground that had been cleared honestly, however hard the clearing had been. Chloe stirred as we pulled into the driveway, blinking. Daddy, she murmured, still half asleep.
Dude,
Can we go back to see June? Whenever you want, sweetheart, I told her.
I'm very excited.
She smiled, closed her eyes again. That was the whole of it, right there. That smile, that easy answer, that ordinary grace. Not every rebuilding looks dramatic from the outside. Some of the most important construction happens in the quiet, in the small, consistent things, in the choice to show up without conditions. I carried her inside, tucked her in, stood in her doorway for a moment in the dark. Then I went downstairs, made coffee, and got back to work.